Introduction. This report examines 4 historical figures: Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, King Louis XVI, and Francisco Franco, focusing on similarities in their ideologies, behaviors, and ultimate fates, which were marked by failure and decline. These men, spanning different eras and contexts, rose to power through authoritarian means, but encountered downfall due to a combination of internal weaknesses, external pressures, and societal backlash. The analysis draws on established historical facts to highlight patterns in their rule and demise. It concludes with a discussion on why contemporary leaders, such as Donald Trump, might benefit from reflecting on these examples as cautionary tales of overreach and miscalculation. Similarities in ideology. All 4 leaders espoused ideologies rooted in right-wing or far-right principles, emphasizing nationalism, hierarchy, and resistance to progressive or leftist reforms. Adolf Hitler's ideology was firmly far-right, defined by extreme nationalism, racism, and anti-communism. Despite the socialist label in the Nazi Party's name, he purged left-wing elements, banned socialist parties, and targeted communists and other leftists for persecution, establishing a totalitarian regime that prioritized racial purity and militaristic expansion. Benito Mussolini's fascism was primarily far-right, characterized by intense nationalism, militarism, and the suppression of leftist institutions. Though he started as a socialist, he pivoted rightward during World War I, forging a corporatist state that allied with economic elites and rejected democratic pluralism in favor of authoritarian control. Francisco Franco's Francoism was profoundly right-wing, blending authoritarianism, conservatism, and national Catholicism. It united traditionalists, monarchists, and fascist elements against democracy, socialism, and liberalism, enforcing social control through militarism and the repression of left-wing opposition. King Louis XVI worldview, in the context of the French Revolution's political spectrum, was right-wing or even far-right for his era. Supporters of the monarchy, aristocracy, and the Ancien Regime's traditions sat on the right in the National Assembly, opposing revolutionary changes that sought to curtail royal power and promote equality. These ideologies shared core traits: a disdain for democratic institutions, a preference for centralized authority, and an alliance with conservative or elite interests to maintain order. They often positioned themselves against perceived threats from the left, such as communism, socialism, or republicanism, using propaganda and force to consolidate power. Similarities in behavior. The behaviors of these leaders exhibited striking parallels, centered on authoritarian governance, suppression of dissent, and a reliance on personal charisma or military might to sustain rule. Hitler employed aggressive expansionism, initiating World War II through invasions and alliances, while domestically enforcing racial laws, censorship, and concentration camps to eliminate opposition. His regime's behavior was marked by cult-like loyalty demands and systematic violence. Mussolini mirrored this through his March on Rome in 1922, which installed him as dictator, followed by the dissolution of parliament, violent crackdowns on socialists and trade unions, and imperial ambitions in Ethiopia and Albania. He fostered a personality cult, emphasizing machismo and state control over individual freedoms. Franco's ascent via the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, involved brutal military campaigns against Republicans, followed by decades of dictatorship characterized by executions, forced labor camps, and censorship. He maintained power through a coalition of church, military, and monarchy, suppressing regional identities and leftist movements. Louis XVI, though less overtly aggressive, behaved as an absolute monarch resistant to reform, vetoing revolutionary decrees and attempting to flee France in 1791, which alienated the populace. His court was infamous for extravagance amid widespread poverty, and he relied on royal privilege to stifle emerging democratic voices. Common behavioral threads included the use of force to quash opposition, economic policies favoring elites, and a failure to adapt to changing societal demands. Each leader isolated themselves in echo chambers of loyalists, leading to decisions detached from reality, such as overextended military campaigns or ignored public grievances, destiny to a fate of failure and major factors in their decline. Each man's trajectory ended in failure, defined by the collapse of their regimes, personal downfall, or posthumous rejection of their legacies. While Mussolini and Louis XVI met violent ends at the hands of the people, Hitler chose suicide amid defeat, and Franco succumbed to illness after a prolonged decline. The major factors in their declines often stemmed from overambition, economic strain, and loss of popular support. Adolf Hitler's fate culminated in failure with Nazi Germany's defeat in World War II. Facing imminent capture by Allied forces, he committed suicide on April 30, 1945, in his Berlin bunker. The major factor in his decline was military overextension, invading the Soviet Union in 1941 while fighting on multiple fronts led to catastrophic losses, resource shortages, and internal dissent, eroding his regime's invincibility. Benito Mussolini's rule ended in ignominy when he was captured by Italian partisans on April 27, 1945, and executed the following day. His body was publicly displayed in Milan as a symbol of retribution. His life was taken by the people he once ruled, reflecting widespread resentment. The primary factor in his decline was alliance with Hitler and involvement in World War II, which brought economic ruin, military defeats in Africa and Greece, and a loss of domestic support, culminating in his ousting by the Grand Council of Fascism in 1943. King Louis XVI's monarchy collapsed during the French Revolution, leading to his trial and execution by guillotine on January 21, 1793, amid cheers from the crowd, his life taken by the revolutionary people. The key factor in his decline was fiscal mismanagement and resistance to reform. France's massive debt from wars and court excesses fueled public outrage, while his indecisiveness alienated both conservatives and radicals, paving the way for the radical phase of the revolution. Francisco Franco held power until his natural death on November 20, 1975, from heart failure compounded by Parkinson's disease and other ailments. He was notably sickly in his later years, relying on medical interventions. Though he died in office, his regime's failure manifested posthumously as Spain transitioned to democracy under King Juan Carlos I. The major factor in his decline was internal stagnation, economic isolation post-Civil War, coupled with growing international pressure and domestic unrest in the 1960s and 1970s, weakened his authoritarian grip, making his system unsustainable without his personal control. In summary, their fates underscored a pattern of failure: violent overthrow for Mussolini and Louis XVI, self-inflicted end for Hitler, and a lingering health-induced exit for Franco, followed by regime dissolution. Overarching factors included hubris in decision-making, failure to address economic inequalities, and the inevitable backlash from suppressed populations or external adversaries. Why Donald Trump should become aware of these gentlemen's fates. Donald Trump's ideology, described as right-wing with elements of nationalism, populism, and an America First approach, shares superficial similarities with these figures in its emphasis on strong leadership and skepticism toward multilateral institutions. While 64% of Americans view him as conservative, his departures from traditional republicanism, such as on-trade protectionism and entitlement programs, position him as a populist right-winger. Trump should heed these historical fates as a reminder of the perils of authoritarian tendencies and political isolation. Leaders like these four often underestimated public discontent, leading to abrupt downfalls. For instance, ignoring economic grievances or over-relying on personal loyalty can erode institutional stability. In a democratic context, awareness of such patterns could encourage adaptability, dialogue with opponents, and respect for checks and balances, preventing the kind of polarization that historically precipitated failure. This reflection promotes prudent governance rather than inevitability, drawing lessons from history to foster resilience in leadership.